This is Ayani,
And this is Corinne.
and you're listening to Sex, Love, Literature, a pop culture podcast where we take a semi-scholarly look at why
And how.
the sex stuff in media matters.
This episode, we're talking about the ins and outs of the friends to lovers trope.
We cover what we think makes for a great friends to lovers story, but also what really, really doesn't, and throw in tons of examples.
And they promise that only some of them are Kdramas.
More like most of them.
I think it's like half. Anyway, if you have a favorite friends to lovers story, whether or not it is a K-drama, but if it is a K-drama, I'll be very happy. Come let us know on Twitter and Instagram at SexLoveLit.
And don't forget to subscribe to SLL on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any of your other favorite podcast platforms.
All right, let's get started.
Hello, SLL listeners. Thanks again for joining us for another episode of everybody's favorite sex love literature. I'm bigging us up. That's I've decided.
Out of all the sex love literatures that there are, we are the best one.
We are the top. That's not quite how I meant it, but that's how I'm going to roll with it. Already off to a stellar start, as always. As always. How are you doing, Corinne? You have banter on our outline, so I feel like we need to banter some.
I don't know. I mean, it's spring break as we record, but like the end of spring break, so I have regrets about the amount of sleep that I didn't get that I had hoped to.
That's a very you set of concerns.
Yeah.
Which sounds worse when I like giggle about it, but I hope you had a good spring break though, filled with some rest, even if not sleep.
Yeah, sure. How about you? How are you? You don't get spring break, but
no, I don't get spring break anymore. No, doing all right. Andrew and I think the last episode that we recorded was before we moved, and now we are post-move.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, so back in New Jersey, trying to still figure out this whole like weather thing, which I know sounds like the most ridiculous thing to complain about, but like when I've been in warm climates for the last 5 years, so I haven't needed like multiple wardrobes in order to make it through the week. But now it'll be like it's 20 degrees, and I'm like, what do I wear? And then it'll be like it's 65 degrees, and it's like, well, I can't wear what I wore when it was 20 degrees, but it's not summer, so I don't know. I'm just confused. I'm confused.
Well,
Corinne.
it's high 80s here in Florida, so I don't know what to tell you.
Well, when it's high 80s on the weekend, I wear like a t-shirt and house shorts. So like I know what to do, but I don't know what to do for this.
I'm mostly annoyed at the lack of time this season for me to get to wear ankle boots. I feel like I have just been wearing chacos all year. Like there was not like a month where I got to wear my ankle boots. It's already too hot.
Yeah, no, and this is March, right? Yeah, so I don't think you're gonna get an ankle boot chance at this point, not in Florida.
Yeah, I might get a couple times when it rains, but that's if it's like 70-degree rain, and I don't know, we're already in the 80s, so
yeah, Florida is not the climate for boots, unfortunately. All right. Well, I think that was good banter. I'm proud of us following our outline to a T.
Talking about the weather, always spicy.
Well, we can get a little spicier when we let folks know what our topic is of conversation today. So we haven't done an episode like this in a little bit. A lot of them have been kind of focused on certain types of stories or specific deep dives and things like that. So we thought we would do a fun kind of trope related episode, thinking about an overarching category of story and then doing a little diving into it. So this episode is going to be about friends to lovers stories. So this was something, Corinne, that you were interested in talking about. Why friends to lovers? Why do you want to do an episode about this? Or why did you? Because we are actually in the midst of doing it right now.
So I wanted to talk about friends to lovers because I think it is a hard trope to get right
Mm.
because, and I don't want to get too into this before we actually start talking about it, but I think it's
Yeah.
hard to get right because you have to have a convincing reason about why you make a convincing narrative reason or character reason or something
Mhm, mhm.
to precipitate the transition from friends to lovers. And I think there's a
Mm.
lot of variants of that I think are interesting to get into. Also, it's because I watched a K-drama that people did not like, that I think did friends to lovers poorly. Look, it always comes back to K-dramas for
I
me. We know this.
That's literally what I was gonna say. I was like, "Of course this was K-drama related. Of course." I shouldn't have even asked. I should have just known.
But it's because the K-drama Love is for Suckers did the friends to lovers transition pretty poorly in a way that people were not convinced by. So I was like, okay, well
Mm.
then what does work? If this isn't it, what is?
All right, that's a good place for us to almost get started because before we get started, we have to do the most important thing that we do every single episode, and that is share what's sparking joy. Hey, Corinne. Hey, Corinne. What's sparking joy? I'm
So
sorry, I'm on one today, apparently.
So, What's Sparking Joy is a segment where we talk about something we are watching, reading, or listening to that is currently sparking joy for us. So, Ayani, what is sparking joy for you?
Oh, for me, so last weekend, and I guess this is joy that was sparked in the past, but is still bringing me joy in the present. I binge watched Next in Fashion quite accidentally because I was doing laundry all day, and it is very
Mm,
easy to put on Netflix and just be like, "Oh, I'm folding all of the clothes." So I watched all of Next in Fashion, in part because Corinne started watching it, and I didn't want to be left out. And
oh, it's so good.
it's so good. It's so good. And as someone who is like an amateur, what seamstress is not the right word. I like to sew, but not. I wouldn't call myself a seamstress. I've never made like clothes before, but I think sewing
But
is fun. I
you do
like
make
doing
like
it.
not fan outfits. You do make good cosplay costumes.
That's true, but oftentimes I'm repurposing other things.
That still
And
counts.
oh, that's true. There was a whole episode about repurposing clothes. So you're right. That counts. But the point is that I like to do it. It brings me joy. And watching Next in Fashion kind of reminded me why I like it so much. Watching people who are kind of like at the top of their game just be like, ah, yes, I'm making up this pattern off of my brain. And I'm like, it's so amazing. They're just, all
Mm-hmm.
of the people on the show are artisans of their craft and think so deeply about what it means to both make clothing, but then have their own personal take and interpretation on what fashion is. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just so fun for me to watch. So that was something that sparked a lot of joy for me and makes me want to whip my sewing machine out. But right now it is in the box that Chloe is using to get into the bed because she is an old lady. So when we are more settled after this move, then I will probably start sewing again. And then really
Also,
quickly,
Chloe is a cat. If this is
oh
your
yes,
first time listening,
yes, that's context. Chloe is a cat. She is an old lady cat. That's important knowledge. You're right. She's not like a child
you don't just
or
have like
a
old
third
women climbing
partner.
into your bed.
No, yeah, she's no, it's not that kind of situation. The other thing that I was going to mention before we kind of broke down and had a laughing fit was recently listened to Hayley Williams's album that she put out as a, I guess it was a solo album
Hmm.
that came out in 2020. So this has been out for a while. I'm late to the party. I think I knew it existed, but then never like actually listened to it. And there's a song on the album called Pure Love that I really, really, really like. It's a lot of fun. I keep coming back to it. I'll like just have it playing in my head sometimes. I need to listen to it. So I found it maybe like a couple months ago, maybe not that long ago, but it it brings me joy every time it comes up on my Spotify, my chosen songs playlist. And I listened to it before we got on recording. So
Hmm.
I figured shout it out as a song that's great and it's sparking joy for me. Whew. So Corinne, what is sparking joy for you?
So, in a miracle of miracles, I remembered how to read, but only sort of. So I've been reading a English translation of the Chinese light novel The Dreamer in the Spring Boudoir by Lu Changshang, translated by Fuyu Nico. And it is peak Corinne that I am reading this because
I'm trying to hold it together because, like, of course, C-dramas would get you to start reading again. Like,
yeah. So Dreamer in the Spring Boudoir is a transmigration harem novel. So the main character was reading a light novel. I'm going to explain what that means.
Thank you.
Ayani made a very confused face, and I imagine most other people did too.
Yeah, because I was confused. So please, some context.
So main chick is a woman from the modern world, and she's reading a historical-ish light novel. So I'm not entirely sure that light novels are exclusively published on the web, but it's an interesting publishing
They're
space. Not. Okay. So the one that I'm reading, I think, is originally a web light novel. And so she's reading a light novel that is like a harem drama and she actually doesn't think it's very good. So she's reading this and is like, well, this villainess is extremely stupid. I will no longer be reading this novel. And then she falls asleep and then wakes up in the body of the villainess.
Oh, so she got isekai'd. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think they call it the translator that I'm reading it calls it transmigration. But she basically has to make the marquis that she is married to fall in love with her. She thinks. She's not really sure exactly what she has to do to get back to the present day, but the villainess whose body that she wakes up in had been like ordered to commit suicide for doing something to harm the female lead. I don't know. It's like a whole thing. But so the reason that I like it, or part of the reason that I like it, is I apparently like harem dramas. But not I don't like harem dramas in the way that like, so this is really funny because I've like had made a recommendation to Andrew of what I was calling a harem drama C-drama, and Andrew was like, well, I hate harem dramas, so I will never watch that. But what did he think I meant by harem drama, Ayani?
Oh, I don't remember.
No, well, it's like the definition. Okay, but it's like the thing where a lot of people like the same person, I think.
Oh, yes, that's a harem story.
Yeah, but I do not mean that. I mean a literal historical harem where the man has like a main wife, sometimes a secondary wife, concubines, honored concubines, bedroom servants, whatever. And
bedroom servants.
Girl, there is all kinds of hierarchy here.
That's a term. All right, now, please continue.
Yeah. But I don't like it for the love story. I like it for the politics.
I can't stand you.
But anyway,
she says this in our Friends to Lovers episode. I don't care for the love story. Actually, give me the politics.
Not interested. Well,
nerd.
Okay, so anyway, so Dreamer in the Spring Boudoir, Jiman, the main character, wakes up in the body of this character who like is destined at this point to be ordered to commit suicide. And actually the situation is like pretty tragic because she was the main wife and then got demoted to concubine because the woman who was supposed to be the female lead is promoted to the main wife. And then like, obviously, like, you would be upset if that happened, right?
Yes.
So it has a lot to do with like point of view and like circumstances and also like having like plot armor a lot of the time. But so the thing that actually makes this very interesting, well, there are many things that make it very interesting, and one of them is that I am too deep into C-drama historicals right now.
Yes. That's a truthful statement.
But the other thing that is particularly interesting about this particular web novel is that both the female lead and the male lead are actually very smart and behave in ways that make sense. So, and by female lead, I mean Jiman, who like got sucked back in time and then like becomes the female lead, blah, 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 as happens in isekai style stories. But yeah, it's really interesting to see her. Honestly, the thing that is super interesting is how utterly uninterested she is in any of the men that she meets, including her husband, which is the thing that then makes them like intrigued by her. And she's just like, I don't like, this is my job. Like, I don't really care about you, but okay.
It's funny because it seems like it is both a harem story in the sense that you mean, and a harem story in the sense that Andrew means. If there are all these men who are now like, I love her and I will make her mine. So
Yeah, that's probably true, except no, yeah, that's true. I think the thing that is very, very funny, and I think this is true for a lot of the like transmigration stories in C-dramas that I've seen, is that
mm,
she is so convinced that she is the villain and that the plot is going the way that it is supposed to go that she does not recognize. She assumes that everybody loves the original female lead and is
mhm,
completely oblivious when anyone likes her. And it's like,
mhm.
why? But like, it's written that you like this other person though. So could you like desist?
Yeah, could you stop and leave me alone, please? It's funny because I think villainous stories are really popular right now
Yeah,
across the
there's a lot
board.
of them. There's a lot of them on Webtoon as well.
Yeah, and I know I just watched one an anime in which she was the villainess, and I forgot the exact title of it. It was like, "I'm the villainess and I'm going to make the bad man fall in love with me," or something like that. And it's really sweet. She like convinces the male villain who in the dating sim turns into a dragon and has to get killed to like love her and be her husband. And like he falls in, it was sweet. You know, who doesn't love a man that turns into a dragon? As we have already said on this podcast, if you've listened to our Love Between Fairy and Devil episode, that Black Dragon is husband. So,
I Black Dragon is the ideal.
yeah, we
But
support dragon men in this house.
yeah, so two other quick things about Dreamer in the Spring Boudoir. One, I think one of the reasons I really like it is that I really like the translator because she'll add like
Mhm.
notes and explanations for things and then have like what she calls translator ramblings at the end where she'll be
Oh,
like,
that's
I
cute.
think, oh, it's so cute. She'll be like, I think this thing that Jimon did is actually like very dumb. And I think she should not have done that. What do you think? And then she'll also like, she looks for reasons to include pictures of cats,
Mhm.
which
I
I
like
think is
her.
correct.
Well, fun fact, if her name is Fuyu Neko, then Neko is cat, so I'm not surprised then by the
Ah,
cat love.
that makes
In
sense.
Japanese, it's cat in Japanese, yeah.
And then the other thing that I am excited about that I just realized when I was Googling it to put in our Excel sheet is that there is a C drama adaptation of it that is in production.
How fun.
Yeah, it may never be released because C drama production and censorship and everything is fucking wild, but it at least theoretically could exist someday, maybe. And the guy, and it like has a full cast list, so they've at least filmed it.
Well, I guess we'll hold out hope for you that it makes it
Yeah.
through. Ugh, I already feel you bullying me to watch this one like 2 years from now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it could be very bad because so the guy who plays I'm getting way too into detail about this thing that no one else will
Finish
have heard of, I
finish your
assume.
last thought. It's fine.
But so the actor who's playing the male lead, is in another C drama that I really like. He was in The Romance of Tiger and Rose, which is another transmigration
Oh,
story.
okay. Mhm, mhm.
But the main actress, I really liked her in Goodbye My Princess, but she has been really terrible in everything she's been in since then, so it seems like that might have been a fluke. So really could go either way if this is good or bad.
All right. So I guess we can end on that note.
Anyway, read the book. It's good. And it's on the internet. So,
I guess we can throw a link to I was gonna say a link in the chat. We can throw a link in the show notes. All right, sounds good. So that is that's been what's sparking joy. Joy has been sparked clearly because we giggled through half of this. So
yes. All
there you
right.
go.
Well, diving then into our main show. Ayani, what is Friends to Lovers?
Girl,
What is that?
thanks for just throwing that in my lap. Okay, so we've been kind of having a back and forth about what friends to lovers is, how to describe it, is there like a super succinct definition? So high level, when we're saying friends to lovers, we mean a storyline or a story that focuses on characters who start off as friends, buddies, they're not dating, they're not sexually involved, say, and
Mhm.
over the course of their narrative, over the course of their relationship transition to being romantic partners.
Mhm.
Now, when we were talking and discussing, it kind of felt like friends to lovers, and based on a little bit of digging we've been doing, that friends of lovers is kind of like, what would it be, like an Uber trope
Yeah,
almost?
it's kind of like it is both an umbrella trope and a subtype of other tropes.
Yeah, yeah. So it became a little complicated to like pin down, though we found some tropes on one of my favorite websites, TV tropes, that kind of felt right, if that makes sense, in that
Mhm.
sphere. Yeah. So one that Kern found was relationship upgrade, which in a sense kind of sounds a bit like friends to lovers, because what the relationship upgrade is when like the story marks that there has been a shift in the relationship. So they're moving from
Mhm.
one stage to another, I'll say positive stage. So they're upgrading, right, from one thing to another.
Mhm.
And then another is the childhood friend romance, which is kind of like when you have, and this often happens a lot in harem stories, as Andrew and I mean them, right? Where you have
Mhm.
someone who you were friends with in childhood, and now that you are both of dating age, that childhood friend becomes a romantic interest, right?
Mhm.
And then another one we found was just friends, which, like, if you go to the link for that one, it's got all of these different scenarios in which some of them become friends to lovers kinds of stories where like at the beginning it's like, oh, we're just friends, we're not romantically involved, but then one of the scenarios is but they develop feelings for each other and then they have to sort through that, so that could be a friends to
Mhm.
lovers kind of a thing. But one thing that Andrew said, because I was Andrew, my spouse, who also I'm going to be referencing a lot because we're kind of like friends to lovers IRL, but one of the things he said that he when he thinks of friends to lovers stories is that they capture what it's like to fall for somebody over time.
Mhm.
So really kind of getting at the core of like watching a relationship develop and change and grow is kind of what he thinks about when he's thinking of friends to lovers stories.
So, I think and I guess we're gonna kind of get right into, like, discussing then what does and does not count as friends to lovers, because I think that's
Mm,
definitely or maybe what makes friends to lovers work, because I think that is something that can make a friends to lovers story very compelling and very interesting, but I also
mhm.
think there is another type or another subtype of friends to lovers in which one of the people had feelings the whole time that they never acted on.
Yeah.
So the other one might fall for that person over time, but one of them, like, they're, like, either biding their time or pining or thinking it would never work out or
Mhm. Mhm. See, and this is one of the things I wanted to talk to you about because and I kind of have this question that like if someone already has romantic feelings, and I guess this gets into the complicated nature of friendship, right? Which might be too big for our conversation, but if someone already has feelings that they're bringing into a scenario, is it still friends to lovers? If I guess if they're friends, because okay, so one of the examples that I put in that I'm trying to like think this through is like I know you haven't watched, Avatar: The Last Airbender, right? But
Mm-mm.
I guess, the main character, Aang, and then Katara, who's, one of the important secondary characters, right? They become very close friends over the course of the story, and then by the end of the story, they get together, right?
So
But
also as a note, because of the nature of this topic, we're gonna be having some spoilers for most of
oh,
the
yeah, and
text that
this
we bring
this
up.
this show is so old. I'm sorry if I just spoiled Avatar: The Last Airbender for you. That came out when I was in college. So, like
Well, just like Yeah, just FYI, because we're talking about friends to lovers, most of the relationships that we talk about do become romantic.
Oh, yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
there you
No,
go.
no, no, she's right, she's right. But in talking to Andrew about it this morning, Aang kinda has a little crush on Katara forever. It's like he has a crush on her throughout the majority of the show, and that doesn't mean that their friendship doesn't develop, but
Yeah, and it also doesn't negate their friendship.
right. So you would say that even if there was some affection on a part of one of the party, it still can be a friends to lovers story, in your opinion?
I think it can, yeah. I think that is
Hmm.
one type. So I think it's a pretty common version. I think so. Friends to lovers is a really, really common setup in K
Yeah.
dramas. Uh,
Mm, mhm.
but I think also because first love is really, really common in
Mm,
K
mhm.
dramas, those
Mhm.
things then frequently overlap where it's like
Mm, mhm.
like you were my first love and it never worked out like because of timing or because of whatever reason, but like there's this sense where if like it's always been you even if it hasn't actually been you the whole time. So like
Mm.
I don't know, I said that kind of unclearly, but like some examples of that include and see, I think this is interesting and because I think the person who is doing the like pining for years and years and years is more not exclusively, but more frequently the male character, if we're looking at heteronormative relationships. So, like
Mm.
in soundtrack number one, in Happiness, which is a zombie K drama, in Law Cafe, in Reply 1988, in not in Reply 1994. It's the female lead in Reply 1994, but like it is often more frequently, I think, the male character because there's this sort of I don't know, I wonder if it's and we're getting a little bit into like gender norms here. And I do want to also think about friends to lovers in queer relationships at some point in our
Sure, yeah.
conversation.
Mhm.
But like I think when we're thinking about what is attractive, or maybe this is a personal a personal thing, is that like for male leads that it's like attractive to be like stoic and long suffering, whereas as for female leads they act differently when they have a crush on someone in K dramas at least than male
Mm.
leads.
Mm.
So like
Mhm.
in
Mhm.
A Love So Beautiful or in Fight for My Way, like when the female lead has a crush for a long time, it's almost like, oh, this is an extremely rude categorization for me to make, but they're like a rejected little puppy dog a lot of the time in a way that is like
Oh.
almost more pathetic because it's
Oh,
not the like long
interesting.
suffering in silence. It's like they come
Huh.
off as more like clingy.
It's funny, again, this is not what we planned on talking about, but you say that, and now I'm like, that's such an interesting kind of, like, gendered dynamic that a man with a long-term crush is seen as long-suffering and noble, but a woman with a long-term crush in this kind of particular style of story is seen as, like, annoying and clingy?
Mhm. Well, and it almost gets
And
back
something
to
about that
like,
just doesn't sit right with me.
oh yeah, I don't like it now that I have said that out loud. But like it's almost like, and then I'm totally bringing like Western romance tropes here rather than
Sure.
Korean ones, but like if we think about like Lancelot and the tradition of like the errant knight who like loves his
Mhm.
woman from a distance and that's his job.
I mean, it's because she was married to the king, but you know,
Yeah, but
that's none of my business.
but like that as a trope or as a type exists, whereas
Mhm,
like
mhm.
if a woman does the same thing, it's different. I don't know.
Hmm. I don't like that. I don't like that. Yeah, it's not sitting right with my spirit actually to hear you say it because I'm like, and I'm probably not gonna be able to pull an example out of my hat, right? But there's just something weird to me about this dynamic of whose love has value almost that we're bringing up here.
Yeah.
And whose love has value and whose love is valuable in these kind of like long-term pining situations,
Mhm.
which I think is really interesting as somebody who had like a lot of love to give as a young person and it was not always required or not required requited. So, very interesting. But let's put a pin in that because I think I want my brain to like stew on it for a little bit.
Mhm.
And we've been throwing out a lot of examples of friends to lovers stories, specifically in K dramas. But
Look, that's where my brain is.
hey, girl,
That's
we
just the
know,
deal.
we know who you are. We know who you are. But I thought it might be helpful to give some additional kind of like iconic examples of
Mhm.
friends to lovers stories to help people who perhaps have not watched 107 K dramas ground themselves in these kinds of stories. Because I will say there are like romance stories that center friends to lovers, and then there are friends to lovers storylines in other kinds of
Mhm.
stories and other
Yeah,
genres.
it's a very useful trope or relationship development path.
Yeah. One that I thought of was Love and Basketball, which is a classic 90s film in which two characters grow up together, bonding over their love of basketball. So, this is the childhood friends kind of
Mhm.
story, right? And then they have a romantic entanglement in college, but they grow apart and the male lead gets married. But then, like, the end of that movie is so trifling because, like, the female lead goes to his house and is like, gets him to play basketball with her. And they out here in the streets playing basketball, and it's all like sensual and stuff when this man's wife is in the house. Like,
Oh
it's
no.
like trifling.
Oh no.
I love that movie, but the ending, if that was me, I'd have been like, damn, you just gonna be out here playing basketball? Okay, it's fine. But anyhow, Love and Basketball, I think, is a classic example of kind of like the friends to lovers trope in which their friendship is a major chunk of the story. Um, but then when it transforms into romance, we get to see all of the trials and tribulations of that as well.
Mhm.
So that was an example that jumped out to me.
Yeah, so another iconic example is the film When Harry Met Sally, which I think,
Mhm.
and we're also going to talk a little bit about other tropes that go with friends to lovers, but I think When Harry Met
Mhm.
Sally is interesting because it is technically like enemies to friends to lovers
Oh,
story.
that's a good one
Because,
too.
well, but I think if I had to pick between enemies to lovers and friends to lovers, I would put it in friends to lovers.
Okay.
Because
Mhm.
so for people who haven't seen When Harry Met Sally, which I guess is possible, but I guess spoilers for When Harry Met Sally, but,
That movie older than you are?
oh yeah, it's from the '80s. But they
Spoiler alert for a 30-plus-year-old movie.
but they take a road trip together, or they travel together, they basically carpool from Chicago to New York, and they hate each other on this road trip and are like, "Well, I guess we're not gonna be friends. I don't like you very much." And then run into each other again one more time, like, on an airplane, and again are like, "Ooh, I don't like this person very much." But at that point, they're both about to get married for the first time, and then they run into each other again several years later at a bookstore and are like, "Ah, we are both divorced. I guess we'll be friends now." And then they become friends.
We have something to bond over, uh-huh.
But so, like, the third time they meet, they become friends, and then they are friends for a long time, and then they fuck, and then they aren't on speaking terms for a little while, and then they decide to get
It'd be
married.
like that sometimes.
But a lot of
Oh.
that movie is them being friends.
Uh-huh,
So,
uh-huh.
like, that is where I think that the narrative emphasis is on the development from friends to lovers rather than on from enemies to friends and
Okay.
then to
That
lovers.
makes sense. That makes sense. So, looking because Corinne has this, like, memory for these stories. She has this whole list, and I was like, I'm struggling to think of too." But looking at a list of, like, great friends to lovers storylines, one that came up was Eleanor and Chidi from The Good Place.
Mhm.
And when I read that, I was like, "Oh, yeah, that does make sense." And they weren't what's interesting about The Good Place, and this is, like, within the first couple of episodes, is that when they're placed together, the Chidi's assumption is that they are soulmates, right, in the
Mhm.
afterlife. They've been paired with their soulmate who they will love and be bonded to until the end of time, which we learn very quickly that this is not the truth and this is not the case because they're
Mhm.
in the bad place. But Eleanor and Chidi do develop kind of a friendship and they start to care about each other. And then it does transition to them having feelings, romantic feelings for each other,
Mhm.
which in this is in season 2, right? They have to do over and over and over and over again. Their
Well,
like
and
friends to lover storyline is like rebooted.
I think something that is super interesting about thinking about Eleanor and Chidi as friends to lovers is because there are so many resets in their relationship, is
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
what is constant for them is that they are important people to each other, but it is not always
Mhm.
constant that their relationship becomes romantic or sexual.
Mm. Mhm. 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 Yeah, and it's interesting to think about the possibility in that way because
Mhm.
ultimately where they end up is in the lovers bucket, right? But the fact that
Mhm.
they went through it so many different times in so many different ways kind of opens up this interesting question of like life and probability, which again is way too broad for our conversation that we're having right now. But yeah, I think that's a good point that you make. I like that. I like that.
So we also did an Instagram poll on our Insta account at SexLoveLit, where you should find us,
You should
to
find us and
ask
follow us. You should do it.
to ask for some other people's favorite friends to lovers stories. And some that we got include Pride and Prejudice, which is one that my mom said, but I'm going to push back and say that actually I think that is more enemies to lovers, and the Jane Austen friends to lovers story is actually Emma. Uh,
Oh, spicy take, but I don't necessarily disagree. It almost felt like one-sided enemies because I think Elizabeth hated Darcy a lot more than he hated her. But she was
mhm.
like, "I hate that man," and he was like,
Well, and
okay."
also, like, even in the, like, brief period where they're, like, friends-ish, there is the feeling that it's like, they should fuck, though. So, like, it's never convincing. Anyway, we'll get into, like, what makes a convincing friends to lovers story.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
But some other ones that people mentioned are Jake and Amy on Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which I think is a great example.
Mhm,
Uh,
I agree.
Happiness, the Korean drama, which I think I've already mentioned. That's one of my favorites as well because that one I think works really well because the main couple there are like a dream team both before and after they get
Mm.
romantically involved. They're
Mhm,
a
mhm.
dream zombie fighting team. So 10 out of 10. Uh, Semantic Error, which is a Korean boys' love drama. Something in the Rain, which is also known as Pretty Nuna Who Buys Me Food, is another good one. I think that one is interesting I think the male lead likes the female lead more and sooner than she likes him.
Mhm, mhm. And then one other one that we had was, She-Ra and the Princesses of Power as a good example of enemies to friends to lovers as well. So, yeah, we got some good stuff from our listeners there. And
Thinking
also shows
of, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say it shows the range of, like, these kinds of stories because 'cause we're touching on a bunch of different genres from, like, comedy to zombie drama to animated action drama. So, like,
Mm-hmm.
there's so many different ways that friends to lovers can function. And that
Mm-hmm.
was it.
Yeah, so thinking then about, again, sort of the range of these examples, I think it's interesting to think about long form versus short form or shorter form
Oh, sure,
storytelling
yeah.
for
Mhm.
friends to lovers because, like, so thinking about like Jake and Amy on Brooklyn Nine-Nine, it takes like seasons for them
Yeah,
to
it's
get
a long time.
together.
Mhm.
Whereas in something like, like a film, like When Harry Met Sally, like it does take them years to get together, but like that's the story is about their relationship as opposed to like what's happening in this police precinct where people also happen to have friendships and other kinds of relationships.
Right. Mhm, mhm. Yeah, and I think it's an interesting question about, like, time, right?
Mhm.
Because I know you were kinda thinking about long form and short form, but also when you said that, it makes me think about how much time is covered in the amount of time of the medium. So, like,
Mhm.
with Happiness, right? How much time actually goes by? I know it's a 16 episode drama, right? But, like, how much
I
ground is
think
covered?
Happiness might be 12 episodes. So, and this is
Oh,
something that
okay.
I think it's a reason that they really like the Friends to Lovers trope in K-dramas is they start in high school or they start earlier, and
Mm.
then we'll have like a
Mhm.
flash forward, which they do a lot more frequently in K-dramas than in American television, I think. So like
Mm.
we see them, the two main characters, become friends in high school in like a very dramatic way. Like the male lead has just, it's been a little over a year since I've watched this, so I might be a little bit fuzzy on the
Mm.
details, but he's just, like, found out he can't play not basketball, baseball anymore because he has a shoulder injury, and he's, like,
Mm.
sitting on the edge of the roof, and everyone is
Oh.
freaking out because they think he's about to jump, and the female lead is like, "Well, I'm really bored in my classroom right now, so I'm going to go intervene." So what she does is she goes to talk to him, and the police are there, the firefighters are there, and they have like stretched out the mattress on like the ground in case he should fall. And what she ends up doing is pushing him off the roof.
Oh. Are we sure this isn't enemies to friends to lovers?
Well, they
Like
then at that point she pushes him off, so, and because she knows he'll land safely,
Mhm.
or she thinks he'll probably land safely.
That's real extra. I
Anyway,
don't think I'm becoming friends with somebody who pushes me off a roof, but,
well, I mean, she then is arrested for this. And he asks her out and she says no, but then they become best friends. And then
Okay.
that drama is so interesting because then there's also like zombies happening. But they also have like a fake dating slash contract marriage because she
Oh,
needs
love
to
fake
get
dating.
married to get an apartment. So there are reasons for this. They make sense. Just go with it. But like,
Okay.
so they get like fake married and then they get quarantined for the zombie apocalypse in this apartment that she really wanted to get. But there is a big time jump where it's like we see the very traumatic events that make them friends. Uh
Mhm,
and then when
mhm.
we see them again, they are friends. And she's like, "Well, like if I'm going to have to like fake marry someone, obviously it will be you. Like you're not seeing
Mm,
anyone, right?" But he's basically been in love with her the whole time.
mhm, mhm. Ever since she pushed him off a roof.
I mean, it's one way to have a meet cute.
D I I'm scared of edges, like, in high up places, so it just sounds like the worst possible way. I would never forgive that person. I'm like, "You're my enemy for life now," which I guess would make a compelling enemies to friends to lovers, but, like, also absolutely not.
But because of the time skip, I think so the thing that makes it convincing that they're friends is we see when they become friends. We are not just told that they are friends. And while there is a
Mhm,
time
mhm.
skip, there is a while of them being friends before the zombie situation makes them realize their feelings for each other.
I was gonna make a bad joke about zombies, but I'm just gonna let it go. That makes me think of something that I was kind of wondering while we were plotting this episode, though, is like, how long does a story need to sit with the friendship part of things for it to really feel like friends to lovers? Because there was another show that popped up in my suggestions, which is called I think it's like Love is Hard When You're an Otaku, right? And
Mhm.
in the first episode, the main couple gets together on like a on happenstance. Well, to explain, they were friends previously, they knew each other previously. They're both big nerds. One is a big cosplay, she does like BL stories, she goes and sells her work kind of nerd, and the other one is a big
Mhm.
like video game nerd. And she complains that like when she dates dudes, they don't appreciate this side of her. So as soon as that part comes out, they're like, "Oh, she's weird," or she can't let that part out because she's afraid that guys will leave her. So
Mhm.
they are just like, "Why don't we start dating?" And at first it's like, "Haha, it's a joke," but then they start dating, and then the rest of the show is about them dating. So, it feels like I'm not trying to knock the fact that in a romantic relationship, you develop and your relationship changes and you learn new things about each other, and it's kind of like developing a friendship. But because they were friends off screen, right? And most of the show is about them in this relationship. I'm
Mhm.
like, does that count as a friends to lovers story? And I'm not certain. Part of me says no, because it just feels like it's a romance, right? The friendship and seeing them build their friendship is not the point of the story.
Mhm. So I feel like it's something where I might be willing to categorize it differently if I'm talking about the relationship versus the show, because
Mm.
I wouldn't call Brooklyn Nine-Nine a friends to lovers show,
No,
but
yeah.
Jake and Amy are a friends to lovers relationship.
Mhm.
And maybe I don't know, maybe it is more complicated than when it is definitely a romance. And
Right.
I think you still is there another category you would put it in? Like, is there another bucket it would go in besides friends to lovers?
I mean, I think I would just call it a romance. So as I said, I'm gonna
Mhm.
bring up a real life example, right? So Andrew and I have known each other forever, right? We met in high school. We were friends for a long time before we started dating. But if you wrote a story about us and it was from like when we got married on, that wouldn't be to me a friends to lovers story, even though
Hmm.
our romantic story is a friends to lovers story. Now, if you started, I don't know, back when we were in our early 20s and we were dating other people, right? But we were friends and told it from there, then that would feel like a friends to lovers story to me because a large part of it would be about us as friends before we got together. You know what I mean?
So I think maybe then this sort of leads into the question of what makes a good friends to lovers story.
Oh,
So for it to
excellent.
be
Yes.
like a compelling or a convincing friends to lovers story, we have to believe that they're friends.
Yeah, I
And the
agree.
thing
Mhm.
that makes us I think there are different strategies that can be deployed to make us believe
Mhm.
they're friends. And one of that could be seeing them be friends for 5 seasons before they start dating. Uh,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
I think
Mhm.
it like in Happiness, which apparently is going to be another one of my touchstones here, is like the thing that makes us believe they're friends is seeing the start of the friendship. And it's okay that we have the time skip to
Mhm.
when the
Mhm.
series of events starts that makes them start to see each other differently.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I think for me, right, it needs a little bit of the friendship to be a convincing friends to lovers story. Not that it's just
Mhm.
not a convincing romance. I really liked
Yeah, it can
Love is
still be
Hard
a
for an Otaku.
convincing
Yeah.
things can still be convincing romances if they're not convincing friends to lovers
Right.
stories.
Right. But no, I agree. I think having that convincing bit of like the friendship, even if it's just a moment of it, makes a lot of sense as like for me what makes a good story. Um and in part because I really like the will they won't they part of things when it's done well,
Mhm.
right? To quote you, when it feels like they should be fucking the whole time, but you don't know if they actually will. I kind of enjoy that when it's not like because that, of course, can be stretched and done to death and not actually be very engaging and interesting. But I feel like when the sexual tension is so thick, you could cut it with a butter knife,
Mhm.
is a lot of fun when we read these
Well,
kind of stories.
and I
Or,
think that's also
yeah.
something that's interesting about, like, American serial television, where, like,
Hmm.
I think some of the best friends to lovers stories that happen sometimes are things that weren't planned, but the actors just have so much chemistry that it's like,
Mm.
of course they have to end up together. So, like, thinking again, it's been a while since I've seen it, but like thinking of Veronica Mars, like Veronica and Logan,
Okay.
narratively were not supposed to be together, but like those two
Interesting.
actors just had so much chemistry and sexual tension that it was like obviously Veronica and Logan like should fuck. So they need to be together. But that can also be a problem if, like, I think the narrative then does, like, a bait and switch on you. So, like, for example,
Mm. Hmm.
Clark and Bellamy on The 100, I think, are an example of a couple that, like, really should have gotten together and never did, and I'm still, like, a little bit mad at it. Yeah. Yeah, I'm still annoyed at that. I fully did not watch the last, like, 5 episodes of the last season of that show because I read spoiler, but I read that Bellamy died and Clark killed him, and I was like, "Well, fuck you. I'm not finishing this then."
I mean, mood, I totally get it. You don't owe any show your eyeballs. You know what I mean? But I think that's an interesting kind of like flip then. And now we've talked about this in other episodes, but like the or actually no. This is something I talked about in the course I was teaching, but kind of
Hmm.
the contract that you make with your audience, right? And it's
Mm.
not that you can't play around with stories or like play around with your audience's expectations, but sometimes when you break that contract, the audience is like, "Yeah, no, I think we're done here."
Well, and maybe this is something that's interesting about, like, the long-suffering man who has a crush in K-dramas that
Mhm.
is interesting, because I think it is about 50-50 that, like, it could go the way of, soundtrack number 1, where, like, they get the girl, but the long-suffering male lead who has unrequited love, he could easily be the second male lead and never get the girl.
Like in, Hometown Cha-Cha-Cha, right? He had a crush on her for a minute, didn't he?
Mhm, yeah, I think he
If I
liked her
remember
since
correctly?
college, yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Well, and that's also, I think, something that was really people had a lot of feelings about in Reply 1988 is that both of the men in the love triangle there, because that Reply 1988 is interesting because it follows this like set of core characters from high school up like into their 20s,
Mhm.
and the two dudes who have a crush on Doksun both are kind of like long-suffering, silently crush having, and you really don't
Mhm.
know which way it's gonna go until, like, pretty late in the game.
I don't know, that just sounds like engaging TV to me, but
Oh, yeah, it was engaging TV, but it also, like I don't know, you knew it was gonna be one of them probably. Well, anyway, I'm not gonna get too into Reply 1988, but I think the Friends to Lovers is interesting, so thinking then about what other tropes it can work well with, I think it can work well,
Mm,
like, in a love triangle.
okay. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. I and kind of building on that, I think I put Love Decathlon somewhere on that list, but, like, I Love Decathlon in is kind of in the same vein as a harem story in that you have, like, one protagonist, and then there are a bunch of other people around them that are trying to win their affection, right?
Mhm.
So there's oftentimes a friend to lover kind of vibe in there with one of the
Mhm.
people in the Love Decathlon. Oftentimes the one who wins, but not always. Sometimes it's the childhood friend, which is
Mhm.
another trope that gets tied into friends to lovers like we mentioned earlier. I think love triangles is a good one. Love triangles, love decathlon. Yeah.
Mhm.
I also really like fake dating. When we are doing
Yeah.
friends to lovers, fake dating is so good.
So I think that actually kind of brings up the next thing I wanted to make sure that we talked about, and that is
Mm,
this something that has to work for a friends to lovers relationship to work is
okay.
we have to believe the catalyst that makes
Yes.
them transition from friends to lovers.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
that
mhm.
could be something like fake dating, or like it has to be something that happens that makes one of them see the other person differently.
Ah, in a different light. Mhm, mhm,
Mhm.
mhm. Do you have an example off the top of your head of that you really like?
Well, sort of. So, see, I don't know if I think I can like this, but sometimes I don't like this. And that is when you
Okay.
see the person that like you are friends with start dating someone else, and
Ah,
then
uh-huh.
you get jealous and are like, "Wait, this is like my person though."
So, okay, I'm gonna give a silly example and then a real example. So that was
Mhm.
kinda like when I would take Chloe to the adoption events, and this person was like, "Oh my god, she's so gorgeous. Tell me about this cat." And I was like, "You can't have this cat, it's my cat." And then I adopted her. So,
I
like
mean, well, and I think it can work. So, like, the example I'm going to give that works, and then you can give your serious example,
mm, mm,
is I
mm.
really like the little lesbian couple in the K-drama Nevertheless, where, like
Mhm.
and this is also, I think, interesting, and, like, another layer of this that I think can work, particularly in a coming of age queer romance
Mm.
kind of story,
Mhm,
is, like,
mhm.
realizing, "Oh, like, that's not just my bestie. I love her."
Mhm,
And, like,
mhm,
I
mhm.
don't just love her, I love her like that.
A
And part
lot.
of the what
Mhm,
makes that happen is one of the 2 women. They're in, art school in college, so they're, like, college age. Like, she sees
mhm.
her friend on what she thinks is a date and then gets very, like, fussed about it. It's like, "Wait, why do I feel this way?"
Oh, that's cute.
Well, but I think it can be cute, but I also think it can be annoying if it comes off
Oh,
as,
for
like,
sure.
being too possessive.
Possessive, territorial. Mhm, mhm.
Because I
No,
don't
that makes a lot of
actually
sense.
I can find jealousy I can find it entertaining and okay, but only up to a point, because I think there's a thin line between jealousy that's okay and like abusive or controlling
Oh, for
behavior.
sure. For sure, for sure. I mean, that extends to real life. Like everyone gets jealous. You know what I mean? There's
Mhm.
no one that is above feelings of jealousy, but it's about then how you act on those feelings and what you
Mhm.
feel like you are owed
Yeah,
by
and
the other
how much
party.
jealousy is romanticized versus
Right.
it serving
Mhm.
as like a catalyst for something.
Mhm. 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 No, I think that's a good example. That's a good example. It's funny because I keep thinking about, and I know this isn't technically friends to lovers, but I keep thinking of Crash Landing on You, when
Mm.
they kiss in the boat and they do a little bit of fake out make out, right?
Mhm.
That it feels like how they think of each other after that moment shifts a little bit.
Mhm. Yeah, well, like something happens to make you like recognize that like you have sexual desire for someone, I think.
Right.
Or that like
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
could
Mhm.
have that and it could be like fake out make out. I think another one that where that can happen is There Was Only One Bed.
I love that trope so much. It's so good.
They use that one in Fight for My Way. I don't think that's the thing that quite makes them get together, but there are a lot with that couple where it's like they're trying very hard to ignore their feelings for each other.
You were telling me I should watch Fight for My Way, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think that's what I want to rewatch. Like as we were planning this episode, I was thinking about it. And it's like I really like all of the people in that show, and I think
Mhm.
it's like a particularly comforting friends to lovers story. And it is also a very much a like, oh, maybe I shouldn't watch it right now. But it's like people who are like around the age of 30 whose careers aren't where they wanted them to be.
Maybe not.
Yeah. And they're sort of doing like a rethink on where they are in their lives.
Mm, I don't know if this will be so comforting right now, so maybe we'll put that one on hold. Finish finish, Romance is a Crash Course bonus book. That's not what it's called. Crash Course in
Romance is
Romance.
a crash course,
Crash
bro.
co
Well, Romance is a bonus book is another friends to lovers
Oh, you're
romance.
right! Romance is a bonus book is Friends to Lovers, though it feels
Romance
like,
is a crash course bonus. Crash
I
Course
couldn't
in
think of the name
Romance is another K-drama that we were watching that we both kind of stalled out on around episode 12.
because murder. But, no, yeah, Romance is a bonus book, you're right, it is also Friends to Lovers because she and the male lead are buddies, right? But
Yeah, they've been friends since high school, which we see it opens on her wedding to someone else.
that's right, and she recently got divorced in this, and
Mhm.
is he long-suffering? A
I
long-suffering love
think
interest?
I think he's a little bit long suffering, but I think he's also been seeing other people. So there's a
Yeah.
difference between like I liked this person, it didn't work out. I put those feelings aside and have been seeing other people and trying to move on
Mm.
versus I've never dated anyone and you're the only person I've ever had
Ugh.
any feelings for, which I guess is
Mm.
maybe the thing that I have a problem with.
Yeah, that's annoying. The way you said it too was just like, "Ugh. Ugh. Go away. Take that somewhere else." But actually, in that vein, what are some things that make a friends to lovers story not work? In your opinion, in our opinion, or to turn you off from that story?
I think if I don't understand why they didn't get together before,
Mm.
if like that feels too artificial,
Mhm.
uh
Mhm. Mhm.
I mean, because it could be that like on it could be that the timing just never worked out. So like an example of that would be one of the couples in Hospital Playlist.
Mm.
They like both liked each other in college and in med school, and then because of like other people who liked who, it was just like that. Let's just not do that.
Mm. Mhm.
And they
Mhm.
never like had a conversation about it, but they both like kind of made that decision at various points, and then they end up getting together
Mhm.
20 years later. But what the guy Ikjun, he married someone else and had a kid, and then she also was seeing other people. So like the timing just didn't work out.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it's
Mhm.
not that they were like waiting for the other person the whole time,
Right.
but
Yeah, that makes a difference to me.
yeah, like there was like always attraction there, but it was also fine for them to be friends.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
What about
Interesting.
you? What doesn't work for you in a friends to lovers story?
Hmm. I mean, I'm in alignment with you when I'm unconvinced about, like, the fact that they were friends, but also
Well, it's like
unconvinced when
when
they
we're
transitioned to lovers.
yeah, it has to be convincing. We have to understand why they didn't get together in the first place, and then we also
Mhm.
have to believe that something happened to make them decide like something we have to believe the thing that makes something shift.
Yeah, yeah. Like, Andrew's reading a manga called Blue Box that he really loves. When I asked him, like, "Andrew, give me some friends lovers this morning," and then he talked for, like, 15 minutes about Blue Box and how much he loved it. But the thing that he says about Blue Box that he likes a lot is that the 2 characters to start kind of already have their little high school crushes on each other, but it's through the story that they really get to know each other, and through them getting to know each other and becoming friends that we really start to appreciate them as characters, as readers, so that when there are these other potential love interests that are put into the mix that we get to know, we have a really good sense of who our main couple is. So it doesn't feel
Mhm.
the same way that like love decathlons do when you're kind of like, oh no, I don't know who they're going to end up with. Like you're grounded in this kind of core relationship.
Mhm.
So it's that sense of really coming to understand the characters and ultimately understand what they like about each other, that
Mhm.
makes it convincing. So I think that's kind of in a similar vein of like, I need to be convinced that you all well, one, that you like each other as friends, but then also that shift to romance that's earned in a way.
Yeah, so that kind of is making me think of another drama that I wanted to talk about, that's kind of an edge case for friends to lovers. So,
Okay.
I've talked about it on the show before because I can't stop talking about it, and it's
Mhm.
the C-drama, The Story of Minglan. And I think it has aspects of friends to lovers. So it's set in the Song Dynasty. So there are very, very strict rules about who women, in particular, like aristocratic women can associate with. So like
Mhm.
Minglan as like she's the daughter of like an unfavored concubine, but she still is like a noble woman, so she can't meet men. So
Mm,
she
mhm,
can't
mhm,
really be friends with the male lead, but like he's friends with her brother and they like have school together or like get lessons together, but they can't really
mm,
quite talk to each other. But then they run into each other through various plot events enough times that like they have an established relationship of mutual respect.
mm,
But because of the time period, they aren't exactly friends, so that's because, like, they're not really
mhm,
allowed
mhm.
to be friends. So, like, where do you think and I realize you haven't seen Minglan. I will eventually make you watch it, even though it is very long. This is part of my, my campaign.
Uh-huh.
But what about something like that?
Well, I think that's interesting because there's an established connection though, right?
Mhm.
Um, and it's funny because part of me is like acquaintances to lovers,
Well,
but
and I think what is very interesting as well there is because the phrase that she uses they don't get married until so this is a 73-ish episode drama, and they get married at
girl.
a little over the halfway point. Uh, but, like, he decides that he wants to marry her, like, before she's, like, aware that this is happening, and he does a lot of, like, political maneuvering to make that happen, and she does eventually
Mm,
agree, and he would have given up if she hadn't agreed to do it. But,
mhm,
like, she doesn't even when they get married, she's, like, accepted to do this as, like, a strategic, "This will improve my life" decision, not as a, like, "I love this
mm.
person" decision, and she doesn't come to love him until, like, they've been married for a
So it's
while.
interesting because that almost feels like I'm gonna make this more complicated than it needs to be, but like acquaintances to lovers to friends and lovers in a way because they're married. But
Mhm.
then if I'm remembering correctly, it's not like they consummate the marriage right away,
Oh, they
right?
do. They do for
Oh
this
well,
one.
never mind. Then I'm thinking about the wrong one. But yeah, so it's like friends to lovers, and then the friendship comes afterwards, almost.
Well, I think so what I'm gonna I guess answer my own question is, like,
And please.
even if they aren't necessarily exactly friends because of the, like, very strict social rules of the time, they have enough mutual respect that it still functions as that, and they have, like,
Okay. Okay.
that mutual respect is, like, what they build their marriage on, and that is also, like, so for
Okay.
me, like, the best friends to lovers stories are when the two people actually, the best romances to me are when the couple then is like a dream team where they're like very evenly matched
Mm.
and balance each other really well. And I
Mhm.
think
Mhm.
that can happen in a story like Love Between Fairy and Devil, where like Orchid
Right.
and Dongfang Chinsong very much balance each other, but that's not a friends to lovers story. But I think it is almost easier to do in a friends to lovers story because they developed mutual respect for each other's strengths and understanding of like
Mm.
the other person's weaknesses while they were friends before before sex got involved.
Yeah. As it can make things complicated sometimes. Okay. Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense to me. It makes a lot of sense to me.
So thinking then a little bit further about after my Minglon tangent, uh, about edge cases in friends to lovers and and circumstances in which men and women can't really be friends except if it's like a close family member or so like Mr. Knightley and Emma is her brother-in-law, which is why she can
Mhm.
be like friends with him for so long
Mhm.
despite like the strict social rules of the time. But another man that a sheltered, fairly isolated woman might know is her teacher. And I
Mm.
do not actually like teacher student to lover
What?
relationships.
You wouldn't like that, Corinne. Oh my god, I would have never guessed. But also, me too. I really squicked out by like teacher student dynamics to lovers stories. Um
Mhm.
unless there is very significant space in the
Mhm.
teacher to student dynamic. I But more often than not what it is that the teacher is still in that position of power over the student when they become
Mhm.
lovers, and that makes me I don't like that. I don't like it at all. I mean, especially as somebody who's taught, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that's part of what rubs me the wrong way. One example that jumps to mind for me right away is the new trilogy that is paired with the His Dark Materials trilogy by Philip
Uh
Pullman.
yeah.
Yeah, the first book in the trilogy was very interesting because it was about the young boy who helped get Lyra to, I want to say Johnson College, but that's not right. Oxford College?
Oxford College, I think.
Yeah, that gets her to Oxford College so she can grow up and not be murdered by the evil church. But then in the second book, it comes back that he's her teacher, and it's clearly being set up that it's going to be a romance between the two of them, unless it makes a really dramatic turn, and we're all very surprised. But the age difference, the power differential, and the stuff that
Mhm.
Lyra is going through that's going to make her susceptible to being in a romance with this character, I don't know. All of it, the power dynamics of it just feel really wonky to me. Uh
Mhm.
and also I want her to be with Will, her first love.
Okay, well, I that's another multiple worlds problem. But actually that does make me think of I think something else thinking of maybe of a potential subtype of friends to lovers or the way friends to lovers often works in YA is
Mhm.
or so a relationship where the characters are friends or childhood friends when they are quite young and then the catalyst that I do frequently find convincing is like becoming old enough to be horny basically.
Sorry. Oh, that's funny. That's funny. But
Well, you
also
know what
it
I
makes
mean
perfect
though, right?
sense. No, yeah, I mean, yes. As someone who went through puberty, yes, I know exactly what you mean. But is there a story that's jumping to mind for you that you're like, "Ah, yes, they know what it is to be horny and now they love each other."
So it's not exactly they know what it means to be horny now, but like a friends to lovers situation would be like Gail Carson Levine's Ella Enchanted, where
Mhm,
it's a middle
mhm.
grade novel. So like it's very chaste. It's extremely chaste. But like Ella does get married at the end to Char, but they are friends first and then
Mhm.
realize they love each other when they're like of marriageable age, which is
How
like
convenient.
16. I don't know.
God, if I had to marry the person I was with at 16.
Medievalist
Eesh.
fantasy is a whole nother situation when it comes to age and adulthood and what is appropriate
Mhm.
when.
You know what that makes me think of, actually, if we're thinking friends to lovers? The, oh god, it's the series that you had me read with the Enchanted Forest.
Oh,
Um,
dealing with dragons?
yeah, because the main girl in that her name's not
Oh,
Cirilla. What is it?
Cimmerian and Mendenbar.
Mendenbar I remembered, but Cimmerian I couldn't get.
Mhm.
But Cimmerian and Mendenbar have kind of like a mutual respect friendship that they develop over the second book before they decide to get married and fall in love.
Mhm.
So that could almost be read as a friends to lovers story too, I think.
See, it could, but I almost feel like for that one, because like the length of their friendship is like the length of the quest that they go on, that it's like it's almost too quick that
Real
they
it's a
like
whole quest. They go on a whole
it's
quest.
like a couple weeks.
Time moves different in medieval fantasy. Ella got married at 16.
Yeah, but she and Char were friends for years first.
Okay. I guess what it is that I really enjoyed their partnership as friends and how they came to
Mm.
appreciate each other. And I feel like I would have felt differently about how they ended up at the end if it wasn't for their quest adventure and how they played off of each other in that capacity.
No, you're right. But I think it does sort of beg the question that I guess we talked about at the beginning, like how long do they have to be friends
Mhm. Mhm.
for it to count as friends to lovers? And does there have to be a period? Because I think something you do have going for you there is that at the beginning, neither Cimmerian nor Mendenbar has any feelings or is like attracted to the
Right.
other person. They
Mhm.
like maybe
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
know that the other person is attractive, but like that's not the point
That's not the
of what
same
they're
thing. Yeah.
doing.
Mhm. Mhm.
Hmm, interesting.
This is really a thoughtful episode, actually. We've been doing a lot of going, and giggling. So, yeah, I really like that. Keep wanting to call it a quadrilogy, and I don't think that's a real word.
Quartet, let's go with.
Quartet. Thank you. I really like that quartet. Actually, it was quite enjoyable. Any other things that don't work for you? Things that we didn't mention that you want to make sure we mention?
So, something that I do kind of want to acknowledge as a potential pitfall of friends to lovers as such a sort of all consuming trope, despite
Mm.
how much I like it, is this sort of thesis that it often has that men and women can't be friends
Oh yeah, no,
because
that's bunk.
someone's always going to catch feelings. And
That's
that is
bunk.
kind of like the thesis statement of like When Harry Met Sally. Uh,
Hmm.
so,
Oh well, yeah, but I think this is where studying literature kind of bites you in the butt, right? Because that's obviously not the case. People
mhm,
who are attracted to whatever other kind of people can be friends. Obviously, it happens all of the time.
mhm,
And but also on the flip side, a lot of relationships start off as friendships. You know what I
mhm,
mean? Regardless, you get to know somebody. It's like, wow, you're really nice. You're my friend now. I'm
mhm.
gonna get naked with you now. That's not exactly how the transition goes, but like a lot of romantic relationships, a lot of sexual relationships has friendship as their basis. So on one hand, friends to lovers can be kind of a true to life thing, but on the other hand, I completely understand what you're saying. How like if you're looking at them in context, then it's like well. If everyone's a potential romantic interest, then like friendship is just in service of romance, which
Mhm.
is not the case.
So I think actually it goes back to like this question of like, can men and women be friends, which is often then based, if you like say, well, no, then that is based in jealousy and in people not having the agency to like
Mm,
you make decisions for themselves that aren't just based on like being sexually attracted to someone. And I think
mhm,
particularly when I think about, like, bisexual people, because
mhm.
like, if you have the idea that, like, oh, like, you can't be friends with someone if you could be sexually attracted to them, then that really leaves bi people in the lurch.
Yeah, you can be friends with no one. But I mean, that's why there are also all these harmful stereotypes about bi people being
Mhm.
promiscuous or, not being able to keep it in their pants and this, that, and the third. So like I agree with you. I'm just saying there are people who would be like, "You can't be friends with bi people," which obviously, again, is ridiculous. So, but no, that makes a lot of sense. I feel like, honestly, once you take a lot of romance tropes out of their, like, heteronormative context, they become a lot more interesting
Mhm.
in some ways.
So, I guess to kind of then wrap things up, do we each wanna mention a favorite friends to lovers story that we haven't brought up so far?
Oh, sure. Yeah, 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 yeah. You wanna go first?
Yeah, I will go first since I asked the question. I guess I can answer it.
No, that's okay. I can go. I don't wanna put you on the spot.
No, I can do it. So, a friends to lovers relationship that I really, really like is actually I'm not gonna mention a drama, because I've mentioned a lot
Oh.
of those, but Bitter Blue and Gideon in the Graceling series,
You
which
do
I
love
think
the Graceling series.
they have a really interesting relationship because Bitter Blue and Gideon they don't meet in Bitter Blue, but which is the 3rd book in the series, but we see their friendship the most in that book, and Bitter Blue
Mm,
actually has a romantic relationship with someone else in that book. But the sort of, like, spark was there so much between Bitter Blue and
mm,
Gideon that, Krishna Kishore, the author, has actually said that her because Gideon is 8 to 10 years older than Bitter Blue, like, asked
mm,
her to age up Bitter Blue from 16 to 18, so that it was less odd that Bitter Blue had,
mhm.
like, this relationship with an adult man, and then, it actually because for a while it seemed like Bitter Blue was going to be the last book in the series because it came out in 2014. No, it didn't, because it came out in 2012,
Oh,
uh
that's even longer ago. Jeez.
mhm, but that then in Winterkeep, I, like, was convinced I had convinced myself for, like, a decade that because Bitter Blue spoilers for Bitter Blue, but Bitter Blue doesn't end up with her romantic interest in Bitter Blue. It's very much a, like, this relationship was good for now, but not forever situation. So in my
Mhm.
heart, I was like, "So that means Bitter Blue and Gideon are together now," and I believed that for a decade until Winterkeep came out in 2020 when it actually became canon.
Boom, there you go. You were right, Corinne. You were right.
I was. I don't know how much of that is because I'm right or how much I like them is because I'm right or because it is also because I really like their relationship. But again, like the
Mhm.
catalyst there that finally makes them get together is that Gideon thinks that Bitter Blue has died
Oh, no.
and then she is not. So when she's alive, he like is like I'm not this is not getting away from me again. And Bitter Blue has
Not
the
letting
same
this
sort of
go.
like yeah, Bitter Blue has the same sort of like brush with death. Oh, I think I'm in love with Gideon, probably situation. So when they
Yeah.
reunite, it's actually very much like it's like, oh yeah, I'm convinced because like that is a thing that would make you rethink your priorities.
Oh, for sure. 100%. Yeah, no, I'm convinced. I haven't even read the book, and I was like, "Yeah, yeah. Stay together,
uh,
y'all."
what about you, Ayani?
So I'm gonna give a complicated example because it was something that jumped to mind for me because I play all these dating sims, right? And there's this video game, highly popular. Many of you have probably heard of it, but there's a game called Mass Effect, in which is a space opera shooter game. But part of the reason I got into it, and Andrew convinced me to play it many, 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 many moons ago, is that there is a mechanic where you become friends with your crew and you can romance them and do all this kind of stuff. And there's this one character named Garrus, who the internet has many strong feelings for that he is the best man and everyone should love him. But what his storyline is with your main character is that they've kind of they have a strong relationship of respect. And in the second game, if your main character is a lady, you can romance Garrus.
Hmm.
And of course, I decided to because, of course, I'm going to romance the alien man that's your best friend. And it was actually really funny selecting like the dialogue options to be like, but we should fuck though. because because you're one of the complications is that you are different species that have different, like, internal makeups. So, there are things in his body that could probably kill you, but also you're really good friends, and why not take this step together? So it's the interesting question of like, is the transition convincing? I'm convinced
Mhm.
because I'm the one that pushed the transition. You know what I mean? I was the one that was
Mhm.
like, but what if we do this, Garrus? So so yeah, that'll be the one I throw out there. I Due to many tragic mishaps with PlayStations in my life, I never actually got to finish Mass Effect, but in my heart, I always romance Garrus, and he is both my friend and alien lover. So that's what I'm gonna go with.
All right, I am convinced as long as you go on a romantic vacation to Antibar.
Well, that actually would work because Antibar is in Mass Effect. So yes, I'll meet my lover and I will go to Antibar. Woo. So this was our feelings about friends to lovers, enemies to friends to lovers, alien friends to alien lovers. But what are your thoughts on kind of this trope? Is it one of your favorites? Do you actually not enjoy it? Are there stories that are friends to lovers stories that we didn't mention that you absolutely positively adore? You should let us know. And you can let us know on our Instagram and Twitter accounts at SexLoveLit, which is where we post things that you can also and you can also be involved in kind of our behind the scenes content and stuff like that. So, what do we have coming up next for our listeners?
So there are a couple of things that we're planning on talking about. One is we are still planning, if you listen to our last episode, we are still planning on talking about the female gaze, but that one is going
Mhm.
to be a little bit more theoretically based. So that one will take a
Yeah.
little bit more
Mhm.
prep. So we just wanted to talk about friends to lovers instead for now, but we will get there. We also want to do an episode on the webtoon Kiss Bet, which is also a friends to lovers story that we somehow did not mention. They're not lovers yet, though.
Yeah, there's just so many. There's so much happening in Kiss Bet. Like, there's friends to lovers to like wanting to be lovers, but only going back to being friends is a lot. These children have complicated lives, but we love it and would like to talk about it. And then one thing that my personal friend to lover has been asking for years.
Your personal friend to lover, Jesus,
Yeah,
this sounds like dirty somehow.
I didn't mean it that way. Oh boy. Anyhow, my spouse, we'll just call him that. My spouse has been asking for us to do an episode on your name since the dawn of time. He will go into our Instagram DMs and be like, "But what about the your name episode?" Because he's really supportive. But I think we'll finally give him that episode, and I'm going to try to see if I can convince him to come on the podcast for that one. It seems like y'all really enjoyed having him on the hometown cha 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 episode, so he can return. I'll allow it. I'll allow him to return for the Your Name episode so we can have kind of a discussion about that, which is funny, kind of perhaps a friends to lovers story, but there's also body swapping involved and it feels like it's I don't know.
I
I
mean,
don't know.
that's also interesting thinking about like time travel friends to lovers stories and if that's possible. If
Mm.
I'm going back apparently into main content mode here, but that is maybe perhaps another edge case of friends to lovers if you have time travel and the I'm thinking about a Taiwanese drama that I haven't actually seen, but that I really really want to see called Someday or One Day, where
Oh, I like that title.
oh, I wanna see it so badly, but Vicky doesn't have the regional rights anymore because Disney Plus fucked it up. Uh,
All right.
but, another question for, in the friends to lovers pot is if who was friends and lovers first if it's the same relationship and time is weird. That was a bad way to put it, but you know what I mean.
I think our listeners will forgive you, seeing as we are at the end of the episode.
Anyway, find us on, Twitter and Instagram, and, don't forget to subscribe.
Oh yeah, don't forget to subscribe, leave us 5-star reviews, if you're having a good time. Not 5-star reviews, we're not an Uber, but also you can rate us 5 stars on like Spotify and Apple Podcasts, which really helps other people find us if you say nice things about us.
Also, to round us out really quickly,
Oh my
Speaking
god.
of 5 stars, one of the things that was hilarious, and bring it all the way back to what's sparking joy, one of the things that made me laugh for Dreamer in the Spring Boudoir is the first time the female lead has sex with the male lead. She's like, oh, that wasn't too bad. 5 out of 5 stars.
And on that note, this has been Sex Love Literature. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.